A reading from the book of Leviticus. The Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, "When someone has on the skin of their body a swelling, or an eruption, or a spot, and it turns into a leprous disease on the skin of their body, that person shall be brought to Aaron the priest, or to one of his sons the priests. Anyone who has the leprous disease shall wear torn clothes, and let the hair of their head be disheveled, and shall cover their upper lip, and cry out, 'Unclean! Unclean!' That person shall remain unclean as long as the disease persists. And being unclean, such a one shall live alone, with their dwelling outside the camp." The word of the Lord.
I turn to you, Lord, in time of trouble, and you fill me with the joy of salvation. I turn to you, Lord, in time of trouble, and you fill me with the joy of salvation. Blessed is the one whose fault is taken away, whose sin is covered. Blessed the one to whom the Lord gives not guilt, in whose spirit there is no guide. I turn to you, Lord, in time of trouble, and you fill me with the joy of salvation. Then I acknowledged my sin to you, my guilt I covered not. I said, I confess my faults to God, and you took away the guilt of my sin. I turn to you, Lord, in time of trouble, and you fill me with the joy of salvation. Be glad in the Lord and rejoice, you just. Exalt all you upright of heart. I turn to you, Lord, in time of trouble, and you fill me with the joy of salvation.
A reading from the second letter of St. Paul to the Corinthians. Brothers and sisters, whether you eat or drink or whatever you do everything for the glory of God. Give no offense to Jews or to Greeks or to the church of God, just as I try to please everyone in everything I do, not seeking my own advantage, but that of many, so that they may be saved. Be imitators of me, as I am of Christ. The word of the Lord.
us. Alleluia. 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 Alleluia.
The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. A leper came to Jesus and, kneeling down, begged him and said, "If you wish, you can make me clean." Moved with pity, he stretched out his hand, touched him, and said to him, "I do will it. Be made clean." The leprosy left him immediately, and he was made clean. Then, warning him sternly, he dismissed him at once. He said to him, "See that you tell no one anything, but go, show yourself to the priest, and offer for your cleansing what Moses prescribed. That will be proof for them." Well, the man went away and began to publicize the whole matter. He spread the report abroad, so that it was impossible for Jesus to enter a town openly. He remained outside in deserted places, and people kept coming to him from everywhere. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
These passages from Leviticus and Mark will always remind me of a retreat week I spent all by myself on Kalapapa. It's a small peninsula on the island of Molokai. It's only 10 miles square, very small area. It's surrounded on 3 sides by the Pacific Ocean. It's cut off from the rest of the island of Molokai by a sheer cliff wall. It's a 1,600-foot sea cliff, the highest in the world. It's accessible only by a rocky mule trail. And I walked that trail once, only once, switchback after switchback after switchback on slippery rocks because there weren't enough mules to go around. So we were lucky to be able to do that. But there's also a way the way I entered this time, more recently, they have a little landing field where you can take a small plane and land there. But Kalapapa is down here, and the rest of Molokai is up there. So this is just effectively isolated from the rest of Hawaii and from the rest of the world. It's a place that's blessed by nature's grandeur and beauty, and cursed by humanity's ignorance and fear. It was to this remote and inaccessible place that people with Hansen's disease, then known only as leprosy, were shipped like cargo by Hawaiian authorities beginning in the mid-1860s. Men and women and children were torn from their families and communities. Spent some time first in Honolulu, in an area known as Kaka'ako right now. And then they were shipped off on steamers to Molokai, or to Kalapapa. And they were dumped in the surf, 100 miles, not 100 miles, but 100 yards or so, 100 to 200 yards offshore. Just, you're on your own, folks. Make your way ashore. And they had to seek shelter in caves or squalid shacks, clinging to life as best they could. I've stood on that shore, watched the surf crash against the volcanic cliffs, and wondered how many perished and how many more would have were it not for a young missionary from Belgium named Damien de Vester, now known as Saint Damien of Hawaii, or of Molokai. Father Damien told his bishop, I want to go there. He was in his 30s at that point. I want to go there, he said. I know many souls, unfortunate souls, and I ask only to share their lot and their prison. Bishop McRae had asked priests to take their turn for several months, but Damien went there and he said, I want to stay here. And it was as if Jesus of Mark's gospel were standing there, answering the plea of the man with leprosy, the man who said, if you choose, you can make me clean. That man cries out to Jesus, and from deep in his gut, it's really, he splank nitzomai. He takes pity on the man. Pity, that doesn't sound like a pathetic pity. This is a strong pity. It comes from right down deep in the bowels. Splank nitzomai. Compassion in Jesus explodes, and Jesus stretches out his hand, and he touches him, and he says, I do will it. Be made clean. 2,000 years later, it's Damien saying, I do will it. Splantnitzomai. Compassion explodes in him. And I choose to be with you. I choose to live with you. I choose to work with you. I choose to suffer with you. I choose to die with you. And he lived with them, and he worked with them, and he lifted up their whole life, restored their dignity, and uplifted their hope. Together they built roads. Together they built little cottages and a clinic. Together he would organize games even. They had organized foot races, even though some of the competitors have lost their feet. He cheered the island by forming a choir and a band and a school for boys and a school for girls. And despite the horrid physical effects of the disease, Damien insisted on intimate contact. He touched, he hugged, and he bathed them that would not be smiled upon by our public health authorities today. And it probably was not the wisest. Even Sister Mother Mary Ann Cope, who is also a saint in Hawaii and who came towards the end of Damien's life, that she insisted on the, clean conditions and all that. But Damien went to save a people and to reach out and touch them and to lift them up and do the best he could. And he said, Splaknitsamoy, I do choose. Be made clean. He didn't cure their leprosy. That only came with sulfa-drugs. People were only able to leave that Kalapapa compound really in 1953. But Damien did cure their isolation. He cured their loneliness. He restored them to community. He gave them back their dignity. And even as he did so, he took their leprosy upon himself. Just as you notice in the reading in Mark's Gospel, as Jesus reached out to he ended up having to stay outside of town. He had to be in the deserted places where they had been. He changed places with those who had that disease. So he took their leprosy upon himself. I do choose, he said, be made clean. That's Father Damien, Saint Damien of Molokai. And as I said, Mother Mary Ann Cope, Saint Mary Ann of Molokai, also. Well, my sisters and brothers, Mother Teresa said the biggest disease today is not leprosy, nor tuberculosis, but rather the disease of being unwanted, being shunted, of being excluded. Pope Francis calls it the virus of indifference, more lethal than the coronavirus. And as Francis says, there are 1,000 other crises just as dire as COVID-19 that are just far enough from us that we can act as if they don't exist. Just think of the war scattered across different parts of the world, he writes, of the production and trade in weapons, of the hundreds of thousands of refugees fleeing poverty, hunger, lack of opportunity. Think of climate change. But like the COVID crisis, they affect the whole of humanity. In our country, look to the southern border. Look to the Sandy Hooks and the Parklands. Look to the George Floyds and Yamata Arbery's and many others, to the Charlottes and the Mother Emanuels, to the people excluded, ignored because of race, ethnicity, physical or intellectual disability. Well, you know, our baptism calls us to be doctors without borders, healers of a global sickness, caregivers to the unwanted of the 21st century, to the undocumented workers, to people on the death rows of this world. Look at the people executed in the last days of the last administration. The great mass of those suffering from COVID, whose numbers increase exponentially daily with the loss of jobs and mortgages, health care, and above all, personal dignity and self-esteem. A few years ago, a priest of Father Damien's Sacred Hearts community spoke in a mass in Honolulu, and he said, in every generation, somewhere on this earth, a few people embody the highest ideals of humankind: compassion, unconditional love, passion for a dream bigger than themselves, and the courage to be the change they wish for the world. As we go forth today, do we have that compassion and courage to be the change that we wish for the world? Lent begins this Wednesday, Ash Wednesday. We'll be invited to come forward to receive ashes. Oops, no touch. What do? Ashes nonetheless. They'll be sprinkled on our heads. They'll be sprinkled on our heads, over our heads, rather than traced on our foreheads. Whether traced or sprinkled or however, the question remains the same. As we come forward for ashes, do we have the compassion and courage to be the change we wish for the world? Damien did. So did Mother Mary Ann. Spunk needs some high. I do choose, he said, be made clean.
For the Church, to recall the joy of salvation and profess joy to others, to refresh our hearts and souls through our upcoming Lenten journey, we pray. For families, friends, and neighbors weary of pandemic precautions, for courage and endurance to cope with isolation and stress, we pray. For understanding how and willingness to be imitators of Christ, we pray. For our St. Nick's community, preparing for the winter parish party, for organizers, volunteers, and all whose efforts will allow us to gather online successfully, we pray. For all who support the annual Catholic Appeal, sharing time, talent, and treasure, hearing the call to follow Jesus and to bring hope to the world, and for all who benefit from the work the Appeal funds, we pray. For our sick, known and unknown, for comfort, strength, and healing. For Sister Margaret Kozlowski, Mary O'Keefe Negri, John Oldershaw, and Father Tito, we pray. For our dead resting in the arms of God, for Sister Mariella Haythorne, Jim McCulloch, and Rodolfo Rendon, and for Marcos Gomez, Rainey Feeberg, Tim Romer, Marianne Leiser, Fermin Corona, Elsa Vasallo de Paz, and Bob Pedro, we pray. For the prayers deep in our hearts, beyond the place of words, but within the reach of God. For the prayers of prisoners and refugees, and for all that is written in our parish book, we pray.
This Wednesday is Ash Wednesday, with an English Mass celebrated at 8 a.m., English Liturgy of the Word at 5:30 p.m., and Spanish Liturgy of the Word at 7:30 p.m., all in the church. Ashes will also be distributed after the 5:30 p.m. service until about 6:45. This year, instead of the ministers applying ashes directly to your forehead, they will sprinkle ashes on top of your head. As an alternative, you can pick up a small bag of ashes to take home to your family. Because of the extreme cold, the 10:15 a.m. Sunday parking lot Mass will be canceled until the end of February. The Winter Parish Party is this coming Saturday. 3 important actions. First, raffle ticket sales end today. Order now. You could win $1,000. Second, watch the 2 special videos leading up to party night. These premiere this Thursday and Friday evening at 7 p.m. on the church's YouTube channel. And third, See the bulletin for details about how to join the party on Saturday, February 20th at 7 p.m. To purchase raffle tickets, visit nickchurchparty.org and click on Register Here.
One of the beautiful things about having done more and more virtual liturgies is the fact that they're now documented in such a way that makes them so easy to relive and revisit whenever we want. And I'm going to invite us all to do that now for a performance that was filmed originally back in August by one of St. Nick's favorite sopranos, Miss Sandra Davis, as she sings Precious Lord, Take My Hand by Thomas A. Dorsey, who was hailed as the father of gospel music, but whose influence was felt by musicians both in and out of the church. There's a remarkable story of the genesis of this song, too, and is a wonderful reminder of what great beauty can emerge from moments of great pain. And having said that, we would also like to dedicate this to the memory of a faithful parishioner and choir member, Jim McCulloch, who died late last week. We offer condolences to his wife, Chris, to his entire family, and to all in the parish and in the wider community who called Jim friend.
Take my